The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on Chaos2Cured Podcast are the speaker's own. All discussion is based on our own experiences. We do not and cannot guarantee the accuracy or completeness of any information. Chaos2Cured Podcast cannot give medical or health advice. All discussion is based upon our personal experiences and meant for general and educational purposes. This podcast is not a substitute for professional help or for diagnostic purposes for yourself or another. Chaos2Cured Podcast always encourages you to consult an appropriate professional. Chaos2Cured Podcast is here to explain our perspective of the human experience. We hope it leads to questions, learning, wisdom, and knowledge. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in to Chaos2Cured Podcast with Kirk Patrick Miller, myself, and my amazing co-host, Jeffrey Freed. So I would actually like to jump in and say, before we even get started, this show is never intended to, diagnose or prevent or treat anything. So please, if we talk about a subject, we will, of course, give everyone a heads up, but reach out to a mental health professional if it's about that, if it's about like financial services, anything. We're here to talk about subjects in detail. So please reach out to an expert if you feel like it's not in your comfort zone, because that's not what we're here for. So with that being said, I would love for Jeffrey to introduce himself so the listeners know exactly who he is. So Jeffrey, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. I am an author of a pretty popular book called Right-Brained Children in a Left-Brained World. It's an old book. We wrote it in the mid-1990s, but it's really popular. It still is, and it's still selling. And still selling in paperback and hardback. And I've been working with people on the spectrum, people with ADD, just people who with visual learning styles who struggle in the traditional public school system or with other issues in life. At this point, for 35 years. At one time, I was working with as many as 50 people a week, and I just was snowed under, couldn't keep up with it. That's not the case anymore. I'm older, I'm semi-retired, and I just do it for fun at this point. And I've learned a lot. Recently, I've branched out to autism spectral stuff, and I consider myself a real expert on that, and with ADD as well. Longevity is my thing. I've worked probably with up to 2,000 different people. Many of them kids, and many of them are school kids, and a lot of them now are adults or people just struggling. And one of the things that I've noticed is that the diagnosis of ADD was real popular when I wrote the book around the turn of the century. It's not as popular now. It's there, but they've sort of moved into the arena of autism, and that's the disease du jour. I'm pretty skeptical about traditional diagnoses, and I work with strengths to overcome weaknesses. That's my specialty. I'm slightly on the spectrum. I don't have ADD. I thought I did, but I don't. I concentrate really, really well. And that's kind of a disclaimer for most people with ADD, attention deficit disorder. Like two of the words, it can't be all three, but two of the words are shaming. And I'd love to change that as well, but that's about me.
Well, I wanted to just quickly add to, of course, you worked with me, and, you work with a host of different issues outside of the spectrum and ADHD, just like I do. We kind of handle everything that comes our way. And that experience really does help enhance my life. Just like, working with you was a life-changing event. So, it's such an honor to have you. You kind of mentioned, oh, you are so welcome. I loved how you mentioned how working with these people helped enhance your view of some of the stuff. Since our last show was about ADHD, and we're kind of just finishing that show up. Are there some specific things that you learned that are really just fascinating for people to understand? Something you didn't know, or something that's you're really interested in the current time right now?
Oh, yeah. One of the things that's come to my attention is I'm reading and hearing a lot of anecdotal stuff about how experts in prison, people who work teaching inmates in prison have made comments such as, everyone in my class has ADD, bipolar disorder, or is on the spectrum. So that suggests to me a strong link between, the issue people with ADD have with inhibition. They get a powerful urge and they can't sort of stop it, at least not on time. And how that relates to getting in trouble in the real world. We first noticed this in probably kindergarten or early school. Starts out innocently enough. The child will constantly interject, not wait for their turn to respond, run into other kids accidentally, interrupt conversations, etc. And then oftentimes when other children who don't have any kind of issue, their prefrontal cortex develops, not real early, but like teen years. And their ability to filter and to inhibit is way better. With a kid with a diagnosis of ADD, for example, it never goes away, or it goes away much later. So I'm strongly suspecting that attention deficit disorder correlates really, really well with getting in trouble with the law and with school. And that by the time the kid gets out of school, which most likely is not a good positive experience, they've been labeled as a troublemaker. They view themselves as a troublemaker, and they sort of check out or get very, very angry. Because one of the typical things about anybody with a right hemispheric, I'm not going to call it a condition, a right hemispheric style, they really have very powerful emotions, think mostly in pictures, and have such strong emotions that they really feel they cannot deal with it. So they just blurt out and get into trouble. It can be really, really bad. But the worst thing about it is what it does to the kid. By the time they're 17 or 18 years old, they think they're broken. And that's the real killer, is when you're a 17-year-old kid who's always in trouble and views themselves as a troublemaker or defective, huge problems can occur and can lead right out of school into the workplace, driving, and get them into trouble.
That was just beautifully said. One of the things that I found interesting, I mean, as you were describing some of the actions, I mean, everything you described is pretty much picture perfect for what I went through. So,
Yeah.
Going through school, as you know, I was definitely labeled a troublemaker, and I caused problems. And, you mentioned blurting out and interrupting the impulsivity. For me, even as you were describing that, it felt like it took all I had to not jump in to the conversation and add on to what you were saying.
Let me introduce something, Kirk.
Yeah.
Interesting. There's two reasons why that could be. One is powerful impulse that can't be repressed easily. And the other is because your brain moves so fast that you're afraid if you don't interrupt, you'll lose the thought. Something else will pop up. Because remember, the brains of people with attention deficit disorder, especially hyperactive ADHD, there I can say it, their brains move really quickly, mostly visually, and they're afraid that if they don't interject, they're going to lose their thought.
It's absolutely spot on. And for me, of course, when you're trying to answer, there's nothing more frustrating than, you raise your hand, and it's one of those rare times when you were paying attention in class and you knew the answer, and you actually wanted to share it too. So those things all coinciding is a very complex Venn diagram. So when I would raise my hand and they'd call on somebody else, and if that person either gave a different answer or the same answer, didn't matter, that was fine. But just if I lost my thought before they got back to me, it really made me just wonder, okay, why do I even bother?
Yeah.
And you had mentioned earlier just how you see this lead to, issues. And like you said, with the people you're working with that are talking about the percentage of clients that they have that are, incarcerated, and what the percentage that have ADHD, bipolar, on the spectrum. I mean, it's not surprising that it leads to that when there's so much frustration.
Yes.
I was overwhelmed and quite frankly felt, stupid. And that was really a weird thing, because there were a lot of things that I knew I could do well. So I couldn't figure out a correlation between the two. So as I was growing up, and it's easier to explain now that I'm an adult and I can look back on myself and kind of visualize what I was going through. And just because of the work I've put in over the years with, advice from people like you. So when I look back, I can see, myself kind of unraveling and having this battle between, am I actually intelligent, or am I really this stupid? And I literally could not tell. The two sides felt so fitting, right? Like I was failing in certain aspects. I was great in other aspects. And we all have strengths and weaknesses. Mine definitely was not sitting in a chair. And before I forget it, there was another thing that you brought up where you said it started off kind of innocent and small, and it gets more serious. If people catch it when it's at the earlier stages, the difference you can make is so huge. Would you agree with that?
I would. I wanted to add a couple things as well. The most important thing to me is that virtually all people, right hemisphere, people who are labeled ADD, bipolar, or autistic, they're on the right hemisphere side of the coin. They think in images more than words, and they think rapidly. They don't think in steps. They sort of see the whole before they see the steps. They don't value steps, and their brains move rapidly. So in a traditional classroom, that's not rewarded. It's a linear, the typical curriculum is linear. It's presented with, in a word-based way. And the people that are good at that please the teacher. They get all the kudos. So they grow up feeling that they're smart. Whereas the visual kid with attention deficit disorder is constantly, they know they're bright because they are. There's a correlation between, I know autism and high intelligence, and I know bipolar and high intelligence. The same genes are present in both conditions. And what happens is they know they're smart. They tend, because remember, these people have strong senses. They have every sense that neurotypical people have, only more of them. Their senses are squared or cubed. So when you shame somebody who's very sensitive, it hurts them. It's hard to quantify, but it hurts more. And they become very shamed, angry, and they think they're stupid. The parents can tell them they're not stupid all day long, but of course the kid thinks that's their job, is to protect me and tell me I'm smart. And they're not getting that message maybe from anybody. Many times not the parents either, because nobody is teaching about the positive aspects of people with ADD, bipolar or autistic stuff. It is a different kind of intelligence. It's fluid. It is non-linear. Many times it's not in words. They see patterns really, really well. They notice things in the environment because they can be very, very good at picking up stuff that other people don't. So that makes them can make them really creative, tend to be intuitive, sometimes can say things in ways that a neurotypical person can't. And they know they're smart because they see that they pick up enough positive stuff that they know they're smart, but yet it's not expressed. They don't see the results of it. And nothing could be more frustrating than that. A neurotypical person, they're frustrated. Like you said, everyone gets frustrated. But if you realize that the kind of person that we're talking to, their senses are hyper attenuated, they get even more frustrated, and there's no outlet. There's no one who can help them. And that's so sad, particularly in an age where we're seeing more visual learners and more ADD and definitely more autism and bipolar than ever before.
Absolutely. And, when you talk about that buildup, I love when you bring that up because, a lot of times we see this explosive behavior and especially when I have a student or I have a family member and we're very proud of her and her autism and how she deals with each and every day. She's absolutely brilliant. And there are definitely moments when you said that build up, like everything is felt to, the nth degree. And for me, I always felt, and I can see it in my niece as well. I see like this buildup of tension, and you can see it with a conversation. Like she wants to share something, we got to do this first. So then it builds. So all of a sudden, it's like instead of x squared, we're x cubed. Then it jumps to x to the fifth each time, and it eventually I guess shows itself in an explosion.
Yeah, it overflows. They can't put the top on anymore. It's like a geyser. And an interesting sidelight of that is one of the things that a parent can do, or a friend, is tell the person who is angry but doesn't want to express it. Tell them about how dangerous holding things in can be. And let's say, I really want to hear what you think about this. Put it in words. A lot of times they don't think in words, but it's not natural, but they can do it. So you want to, if it can be like a pressure cooker type thing, you don't want it so that the pressure cooker top goes flying off and hurting somebody. You want to get the emotions, the anger. You want them to talk about it. You want them to get it out before it accumulates and causes a massive eruption. And that's huge. The other thing that's huge is just knowing that they're not stupid. Part of my work is, I capitalize on the visual skills of the people that I work with. I teach them how to read differently, how to spell visually, how to follow auditory directions and turn them into pictures, how to speak up for themselves when they can't visualize information. So it doesn't become something that you have to hide. Because it would be terrible to sit in a classroom and, just seethe. That's a good word, seethe. Many times, the first Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you can hold it in. Friday, you're weak, you're tired. And man, something happens and it just comes out and it pours forth with tremendous force, and they get into trouble. Their sense of shame gets activated, and then all bets are off. And if they happen to do something that hurts or, even kill somebody, that's it, they're done. and it happens all the time.
It happens way too often. And, I would say, as we're seeing just a massive rise of problems with mental health, it's, the numbers are astronomical, and anxiety, you have, and then you have OCD, PTSD.
Yes,
I mean, all of these acronyms that we can get into. And the point is that so many of them have overlying connections. And it's how, again, we design a book, and we need it for Western medication. I understand we need it for everything else, from diagnostic coding to getting prescriptions. We need diagnosis. We need to be, have our medical file.
Yeah, yes. We need to categorize stuff.
The problem with that is that so much of it is like what you just mentioned. If each and every student is analyzed, we're all going to be different. And when we're directed the right way, and we're directed early enough, I loved how you said you don't want the cap to blow off and harm somebody. Our whole goal is to make everyone, reach their potential. That's always what I enjoy seeing with a student or a client, when they take off and you see what they're capable of doing. Well, I think, you and I always see what everybody else is capable of to begin with, but watching it realized is a joy. And it's so important to, one, catch it early, two, deal with real experts. That's something that's really important, is, make sure that you make phone calls, ask around, talk to college professors. If you can't find somebody, talk to your MD, get a list of names. If you have a friend or a family member, or you or yourself are dealing with this, go do some research, because you want somebody that really can help you. And if you find the right person, that guidance, it changes the trajectory of your life. And instead of ending up in prison, you said it so elegantly, and teaching them. I loved that you said that, teaching people to say, listen, it's okay to feel. It's okay to, how are you feeling? Questions are such a great way to get somebody to open up, and then we can learn about them. And I feel like that's actually a great practice for them as well, because when they can verbalize it, it's very difficult to verbalize any emotion if we really think about it. Yep. But I hear wonderful descriptions, and a lot of times when I ask that question of a student, client, a family member, which I do often, you just sit back, listen, and it's actually easier for me to see from their point of view when they describe it, and I really am engaged. Yep. That's how I like to engage with people, and I do feel like that is really challenging, and it's frustrating as well from a social standpoint with ADHD, because a lot of times I really lose that focus, and I can't engage with someone with depth because there's so many things happening. And so I'm just overwhelmed with frustration that I can't zoom in, because what I enjoy is delving into something or understanding someone. The deeper that I can go in a subject, the more I enjoy it, which is something I really never knew about myself until I started kind of, working with people that did help me. And that's why it's so important to do so. So I loved all the things you just said. Those were just absolutely spectacular. And I know from a self-esteem issue, you did marvelous things with me. And you just mentioned that, to make sure that the kids do not feel shamed or that something's wrong with them, building up their confidence. There's a difference between being overconfident.
Yes.
We all need confidence. None of us need overconfidence. So, that jump into that one there.
I'll be glad to. A couple of things pop into mind too that I want to get out before I lose them. One of them is, this is a really perfect age to have ADD. it's probably a helpful thing in a lot of ways because everything moves so fast, and there's having a good, strong focusing ability might actually be a hindrance in this world. You got to be able to multitask, and that's what the ADD brain is good at. So I think that the culture is probably rewarding ADD processing and making it more intense. I was going to say worse, but I'm not going to say that. It's just more intense. One of the exercises that I do with all people that have ADD whom I work with is I know they're going to be impulsive. I get that. I'm not going to really be able to change that much, but it's so simple. Like one of the things I do with all of them, again, to be a little bit repetitious, is I say, have the impulse, take about 2 seconds and visualize what might happen if you go through with what you're about to do. Just consider it, and consider what may happen in a linear fashion if you throw the flowers at somebody, or if you blurt out an answer, or if you steal a car. Take about 2 seconds and just go ahead and hypothesize what might happen if you do it. Maybe 10 seconds, and then decide whether it's worth it to you to do it. If it is, go ahead and do the act, and then don't whine and complain if you get caught. And if you don't do it. Hold it in because the cost is too high. I say this would be a good technique for you because you visualize so well, and you can probably anticipate in your gut what's going to happen and what it's going to cost you, and if it's worth the cost. It also takes them from the realm of being a victim to a perpetrator. There are so many people with ADD, they blurt stuff out, they steal something that they want, which could be a car when they get older. And then they don't know why they're in so much trouble. They literally don't. So what this does is they've now considered it and taken a moment and sort of rested with the consequences. So that gives them more control over it. Many, many times when you do this, you become very adept at it. The more you do it, the more adept you get. And it's almost like waiting 10 seconds before you do something, but it's more active than that. You're going through what you're about to do in your head. You're rehearsing it. And then you're visualizing and feeling what it will cost you if you can, and then deciding whether or not you want to do it. That little exercise is so common sense. Anyone can do it, and it really will cut down on the impulse stuff.
That's such a phenomenal suggestion, and I just for anyone listening, the reason sometimes I laugh is never meant to tease or make fun or make light of ADHD or any mental health condition or state somebody is in. It's usually because I get something. And when you were describing that, I just, so many things clicked in my head in terms of, the consequences are so high. And like getting into trouble and literally having no idea like how I got there.
Yeah.
It's like the whole there's the episode of Bart Simpson, where he stacks each, I'm trying to remember what they're called, a megaphone, and he stacks a whole bunch of them together, and he, shouts like hello or testing into it, and all of the windows in the city explode. It's pretty much what happens. And then he turns around and goes, what's wrong? Nothing was wrong with that. And the impulsivity was really detrimental to me. And that is a phenomenal suggestion. And I think that'd be something everyone should be doing more anyway. I think it's such a good idea to cool off before, think before reacting, and jump in.
Yeah, it's what it is it's the weakness is sequencing in people that we work with. It's sequencing, and especially auditory sequencing. Okay, it's not really a weakness if you visualize yourself doing it, visualize the consequences, then it's in an arena of strengths because you visualize so well. Remember, people who think mostly in pictures are more adept than people who don't at holding images for a longer period of time. So let's utilize that. You can utilize it in so many ways. And I do it a lot with educational stuff, but I can also do it for behavioral stuff. And I think the key, most important component of what we're talking about, I was just thinking this as we were talking, is when you demystify something, it gives it far less power. And if you can tell a student or a child, you're a teacher or a parent telling a son or daughter that this is what's happening when you get into trouble, this is a possible way to help that, and telling them that somebody in the entire world knows essentially how they process and is giving them some constructive ways to deal with it, that takes the load off. And a person who is always being shamed and thinks they're dumb and gets tired of trying to please people, so they oftentimes go right to, well, if I can't please you, then I'm going to be the worst that I can. I'm going to go to the extreme, and but at least I'll have control over it. So the demystification process is invaluable. And that's the most important way to help people who don't really understand what's going on.
Oh, that's well. And when you can picture and visualize, and that's a strength. I like how, did you ever do that with me? I'm trying to remember if you did ever have me try to visualize consequences.
I don't think I did. I hadn't invented it yet. This was back when you were 12, 13.
Yeah, I know. I was so young, but I mean, it's such a great.
I just thought of it, to be honest with you. I've been doing it for about 10 years, but stuff just pops into my head. I don't plan it. It just pops into my head. And I am this way too. I have these, I'm not going to say maladies. Epiphanies. Yeah. I have these epiphanies, and it's because I'm this way myself. And this is what I do for a living. I do nothing else. This is my life.
Well,
I don't do any other job but this. I got to learn something.
Well, I think for me, those epiphanies are so important because I make a lot of times I'll do something. I'll have no definition for what I'm doing. And it takes a while to even realize that, oh, this is what's bringing the outcome. That's why experience is so important. It's sometimes, and that's a whole different topic we can get into, is, education versus knowledge. And that's a whole totally different topic, but and we can explore that. And we might need to touch up just a little bit more. I mean, the time flew by so fast. So for ADHD, we can always do a third one of this too, and we can jump around with them. So anyone listening, that there's a lot of information that we're going over, and it was some phenomenal tips and advice. So make sure to please subscribe and follow us on the gig. So Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, anything else, and of course YouTube. You can subscribe there, and to, of course, the podcast, and we'll put it up on all the Apple, Spotify, and all the rest too. So please do that and leave comments. Let us know if there's something you want us to talk about too. Jeffrey, I could keep going, and I know we could kind of continue this subject for a while. Do you want to come back and do a third one of this?
I think that would be good.
Thank you so much for listening to Chaos2Cured Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with everyone you know. And definitely like, follow, and subscribe. Certainly leave a comment if you'd like. Let us know what you'd like us to talk about the next time. Also, in our show notes, there should be direct links where you can follow us on our social media, as well as reach out to us directly. Thanks again, and have a great day.